I've played the most Marvel Snap I've had in a long time this week, and I've honestly been having a blast. There's way more good games than bad, and digging into all of the data on Untapped to pull up the decks for this video today support the idea that there really isn't a clear best deck, and you can find success with a huge variety of things, which is why there's a bunch of awesome deck lists that we're going to cover today. Let's go ahead and dive into the details, ranging from my personal pocket pits to sleepers in the Untapped data and the proven things that are currently coming out closest to the top. Let's get into it. We kick off by Jeff's picks this week with a Fenris Wolf build that's a little bit odd. After testing our latest card release with a variety of enablers, Moon Knight really feels like the absolute best way to consistently get a big stat line. There's tons of good 4 and 6 energy cards that you're going to be ripping out of your opponent's hand, and even when you hit something smaller like a 2, so long as Fenris Wolf is adding 3 or 4 points of power to the board, you're getting a pretty solid rate for your 2 energy play. This deck list is a core that we've played in the past. It's incredibly disruptive with Spider Ham, Moon Knight, and Black Bro proactively shredding your opponent's hand, and then playing an efficient mix of stats thanks to Hood's Demon and Stature's Cheap Body in tandem with everything else that comes to the board. Cassandra Nova is an especially potent tool right now, not only shrinking all of your opponent's stuff, but also being an absolutely massive bomb in the Thanos and Arishem matchups. I think this deck is pretty flexible in terms of which higher series cards you can swap out. I would say Proxima is probably the most important to have since she adds key stats to your board at 0 energy in combination with Moon Knight. Other higher series cards like Red Guardian, Nocturne, and Cassandra Nova can be swapped out for other disruptive / utility 3 energy cards such as Luke Cage, Mobius, and even Polaris or Spider-Man. Spider Ham can substitute out for a different 1-drop disruptive card like Iceman, and even Fenris Wolf I don't think is make or break here since I was playing this deck before it released with Shadow King in that slot. If you're someone who spends a lot of time in an office setting, today's sponsor Flexispot is about ready to make your life a whole lot better. They are the makers of the wonderful OC6 office chair that you'll often see me leaning back in, a feature I didn't know I needed in my life until I have it. They also make the standing desk that is an incredible quality of life improvement if you're someone like me who's spending 6, 8, or sometimes even 10 hours a day behind the desk. Being able to flex up and down so you're not sitting stationary all day is phenomenal. They make the bike chair that you'll often see me bouncing up and down pedaling in. I've been working with Flexispot for years at this point. My code has generated over 20,000 USD in sales on their website. My community could not be happier with all of the awesome ergonomic products that Flexispot provides, myself included. If you're looking to save a little bit of extra money, they've got a sale going on now through December 5th for Black Friday. Check it out using my link in the video description down below for an excellent way to not only improve your own quality of life, but also support the content that I'm making here every single day. My second Jeff's picks this week is a Pixie Moon Girl deck playing some of my absolute favorite cards in Snap. The basic idea here is relatively straightforward. We're looking to double up either She-Hulk or a Pixie reduced 6 energy card with Moon Girl, so we can then have a big flourish on the final turn of the game. And a special noteworthy interaction is that if we play a card into Hope Summer's path on turn 4 and pass with 6 energy on turn 5, it makes She-Hulk completely free on the last turn of the game, so we can play out multiple of them alongside another 6-drop cleanly, even without Pixie fully popping off. This deck list also has a dash of proactive disruption, Spider Ham attacking their hand, Armor serving double duty to disrupt Destroyer while also protecting our big things from Shang-Chi, and Mobius M. Mobius reducing Pixie's downside while also breaking up opposing cards like Scar and Sarah. As far as higher series cards go in this deck, I think Pixie and Hope Summers are non-negotiable and core. Red Hulk can easily be substituted out for a regular Hulk or something like Doctor Doom, that's another top-end bomb, and Spider Ham and Nico Minoru can be other cheap cards that you play on curve, such as Iceman or even something like Silver Sable. My last Jeff's pick this week is my favorite Darkhawk Shell for dominating the Thanos and Arishem decks that have been out in force. This deck list is featuring Anti-Venom as one of its powerful enablers. While we obviously have things like Luke Cage and Shadow King to completely mitigate Anti-Venom wiping the power off of the card that it reduces, it's worth noting that almost every card in this deck generates value even in games where its stats remain at 0. Iron Man and Mystique being the absolute best targets that don't mind at all if they don't have points of power to begin with. This deck list is a phenomenal mix of proactive disruption with the Darkhawk package, as well as reactive things like Shadow King and even Quake that can absolutely blow your opponent out in the right situations. As far as higher series cards go, unfortunately, I think the ones that this deck is playing are pretty non-negotiable. Anti-Venom gives you a ton of cube equity. Darkhawk is the deck's namesake. Cassandra Nova is essentially a mini Darkhawk, and Ravonna Renslayer kind of ties the room together, making your Iron Man draws extra powerful when Anti-Venom doesn't show up. Kick off our high potential category with a Thanos Zoo variation. For people that are new to my deck roundups, the high potential decks have impressive stats on untap.gg, but they have a small sample size. If they maintain these stats as that sample grows, they could easily be the next breakout deck, but there's also a chance that they could fall a little bit short as they become more popular once you get your hands on them at home. This deck list has a really solid proactive game plan with lots of numbers that can go wide thanks to Khazar and Blue Marvel, but also tall thanks to things like Devil Dinosaur, Gilgamesh, and Mockingbird. It's worth noting that Kyera kind of ties the room together, making sure that your Mockingbird and Thanos can't be destroyed by Shang-Chi, and all of your precious 1 energy cards can't be blown away by a Killmonger. A Galactus variation is our next high potential list this week, not wanting to be left out of the big bad action, I assume. It's a pretty classical take on the archetype. You can line things up with Green Goblin and Hobgoblin to organically play Galactus on turn 6 in a pretty commanding fashion, but you also have 2 different ways to accelerate into this game plan ahead of time with both Electro and Wave, letting you play the G-Man out ahead of curve. This deck list also isn't all in on the Galactus strategy, both Alioth and Death serving as fantastic follow-ups after Galactus blows the board away early, but also serviceable as far as making a fair game plan play out in the games where Galactus is nowhere to be found. Up next, we have a Wiccan variation featuring our Season Pass card in Suitor. These Wiccan decks have always wanted to play a pretty hefty curve at the top end, and Suitor rewards you very nicely for doing so. It's almost always going to be a 3-7 and often kicks up to 3-10 in the games where 2 of our 3 bombs show up. The deck list has a good mix of interaction in the curve as well, with both Red Guardian and Shang-Chi letting you disrupt a variety of strategies in key ways. As far as higher series replacements in the set go, I would say Wiccan and Kate Bishop are definitely the most important to have, with Wiccan being the deck's namesake and Kate letting you fill in your curve really cleanly early. All other cards are mostly being played for what they fill in on your curve, so you could sub out other 2 or 3 energy cards for 2 or 3 energy cards that you like playing out proactively, and Alioth at the top end is probably optimal, but could swap for things like regular Hulk or Red Hulk that are bombs that trigger Suitor at the end of the game. Our last high potential list this week is a truly novel Wiccan variation featuring Quicksilver and Domino. We've got a really sweet ongoing sub-theme here, Iron Man, Claw, and Miss Marvel all being phenomenal cards that Onslaught at our top end loves to power up. I found this deck list had a ton of cube equity when I was playing it on stream because Onslaught adds just so many stats to the board in different ways. Malekith is also a card that adds a really nice amount of consistency to this deck. Since Quicksilver and Domino are only 1s and 2s, he's always guaranteed to pull a 3 energy card, giving us 7 energy worth of plays for just 4 each time. Most important higher series cards in this one are Wiccan as well as Miss Marvel, I would say, with the various 3s and Malekith being cleanly substitutable for other cards at similar energy costs. On to our top performing category, we kick things off with Discard featuring Fenris Wolf. That is also one of the more popular decks in the game per metrics on untap.gg. I think Discard has slowly taken over the role of classic deck that's always great from Destroy over the course of the last few seasons. It just consistently puts out really solid numbers in a variety of paths. It doesn't fold to a singular piece of disruption, and it's really satisfying to play in my opinion because there's a lot of key sequencing choices while also being lots of fun newer cards like Fenris Wolf that slot in for different utility. The stats are a little bit unclear early on if Wolf is a big upgrade or just a lateral change in this deck list, but it does add a fun amount of utility and variety to the gameplay that both Moon Knight and Gambit are able to generate in this core. Our next top performer is a Suitor Scar variation that's also the third most popular deck in Infinite per metrics on untapped.gg. The nerfs to Suitor and Scar weren't really enough to slow this deck list down. It's still an incredible mix of proactive stats with all of its 10 power cards, mixed with a healthy dose of disruptive utility that Armor, Cosmo, and Shadow King are able to provide. The very bottom end of the curve kind of ties the whole room together, with Nico Minaru letting you clear Hood's body on occasion and Atuma doing it the rest of the time, while also doubling as one energy card to let you play out Cull Obsidian wherever he needs to be deployed around the board. As far as higher series substitutions go, I do think the cards this deck is playing are pretty must-have. Suitor, Cull Obsidian, and Scar don't really have any clean replacements, and Zabu is unique in that it both accelerates us into our fours while also enabling Cull to play out. Our next top performer is Sarah Control. Week in and week out, this one is putting up consistent numbers at the top of the charts on Untapped. It's a very powerful mix of proactive numbers thanks to Bishop, Hitmonkey, and Mysterio in tandem with Agent Venom and Gwenpool providing buffs, along with Invisible Woman letting tech cards like Killmonger, Shadow King, and Rogue blow up your opponents even if they try to play around priority very carefully. It's worth noting that some people were trying things like Shang-Chi and Fenris Wolf inside of this core with our latest card drop, but by the numbers on Untapped so far, this tried and true list that we've been covering for the last couple of weeks is still better looking at the numbers. Our last top performer this week is an Agent Venom bounce variation. While I like the 12 cards that I featured here on your screen, it's worth noting there's a lot of variation in the deck list that are seeing success on Untap, adding more disruptive one drops like Iceman and Spider-Ham, even playing things like Werewolf by Night or cutting Agent Venom altogether. There's a ton of ways to build and customize this deck to suit both the cards that you have available and the play styles that you want to be attacking. Don't be afraid to try things out and figure out what works best for you if you're a bounce enthusiast. Bringing up the rear in our most popular category is Arishem featuring Thanos. This deck is #1 in popularity on Untapped with a bullet, and these particular 12 cards have the highest games played by a significant margin on the tracker. It's also worth noting that there's a lot of variation in the details, and there's non-Thanos Arishem decks that have been pretty popular as well. As someone who strives to be objective, it is also worth noting that the performance stats of this deck don't look particularly impressive. Its win rate is only okay, and its average cubes are actually kind of on the low side. That being said, it's still incredibly popular because both Thanos and Arishem are pretty novel effects that a lot of people seem to like to play. If you're missing one of the higher series cards in this deck list, cut it for something else. Your deck has over 30 cards in it anyways. You're not going to draw any single one of them very often anyways. It really doesn't matter so long as you're playing busted tech cards, Thanos, and Arishem. I'm having a ton of fun with Marvel Snap right now. If you want to watch me have a ton of fun while playing a number of these decks and lots of others, remember there's a link to my daily deck highlights secondary channel for Marvel Snap. Different decks posted 7 days a week in the video description down below. I'd also love to give one final shout out to our sponsor of today's video, FlexiSpot, for making my wonderful chair that I love leaning back on, my desk that goes up and down, and other things like my bike that keep me moving and active at my desk. If you want to improve the workflow of your work environment, be sure to check them out in the video description as well to get a deal on their stuff during this holiday season.